Why are some of the longevity experts who talk about mitochondria and telomeres and all these other things that I guess they're saying that the studies are showing the more plants you have, the longer your telomeres. And if you're eating more meat, maybe it doesn't work as much.
Let's talk. I'm so glad
share with me the studies.
Well, first of all, let's define longevity.
Okay.
Longevity is defined as what?
Living as long as you can, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
Living longer than expected.
Okay, so that...
And living healthier.
Okay, but now that's not longevity.
Okay.
So now that is a health span issue and not longevity. And I think we have to be very careful about how we talk about longevity. Are we talking about living 6 hours longer? Are we talking about living 6 weeks longer? What does that mean? And I will tell you, as a trained geriatrician, from WashU, it is about the quality of your life.
Yeah, you don't want to suffer for 10 years.
Nothing is going to determine more quality than muscle. Because you must be able to do your activities of daily living. You must be able to be mobile. You must be able to do the things that you once had the capacity for your own autonomy.
Right.
Now, and let's take a look at the longevity expert, or whatever we mean by that. The one thing that we know and have control over, right, directly is what we eat and how we move, right? In order to protect muscle, you need high quality protein. This is in the literature.
You can't build muscle without protein?
No, you cannot. It would be very difficult.
Just carbs or?
It would be very difficult. There is an essential, a need. So protein is an essential nutrient. There are 20 amino acids, and of those 20, there are 9 essential, and you must get those 9 essentials. Now, I will say that of those 9 essentials, you require, and I'm so glad you brought this up, because in those early nitrogen studies and the RDA now, it is not taken into account that we have individual amino acid needs. It is looking at protein as a whole. That is incorrect. I just mentioned that there are 20 different amino acids. The information on nutrition as it relates to protein is archaic.
Yeah.
When you look at the back of a label, you will see carbohydrates, and carbohydrates will be broken down into sugars and fibers and all kinds of things. You'll look at the back of a nutrient label and you'll see fat, and fat will be broken down into, whether it's, trans fats or saturated fats or whatever. You look at the label and it says protein. But not all protein is equal. Let me give you an example.
What's the highest grade of protein and what's the lowest one?
So eggs would be considered one of the highest forms of protein. Eggs, beef, chicken, fish. Whey protein is the gold standard.
Whey is?
Yes.
Not
whey,
plant
eggs,
protein?
No.
Why?
And listen, so plants are notoriously low in the essential amino acids.
Really?
They are. You can eat a diet that is plant-based, but you will require 35% more calories. So for example, let's say you wanted to get your protein from quinoa. You would need 6 cups of quinoa to equal the amino acid profile of 1 small chicken breast. That is a metabolic disaster.
Why?
Because in order to stimulate muscle, you need the essential amino acids. Well, you need all the amino acids. But in order to stimulate muscle, you need one of the branched chain amino acids. Now, branched chain amino acids, they're leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Leucine is necessary in a meal threshold amount to stimulate muscle. And you're like, well, the listener's like, well, what does that mean? That means you need to get 30 grams at a minimum as you age to stimulate muscle tissue. Because you need 2.5 grams of leucine. And this, I earlier talked about Don Layman. These were some of his discoveries.
Yeah.
This is his contribution to science, is that we have an amino acid meal need of leucine, which eludes people. let's say you are going to have 15 grams of a protein for breakfast, 15 grams of a protein for lunch, and then 15 grams of a protein for dinner, and the majority of the rest of your meal was carbs and fat. You will not stimulate muscle.
So you need more protein to stimulate muscle.
It either happens or it doesn't. From a nutritional perspective, you require a certain bolus amount at one time to reach the bloodstream. That is 2.5 grams of leucine to begin this as you age. If you are eating sub-threshold, you will not stimulate the tissue nutritionally.
What do you say to the people that, these like athletes that were extreme meat eaters, then went plant-based, and they talk about how they're stronger, they recover better, they sleep better. What do you say to some of those cases that are out there of these athletes?
I would say everyone is individual, and if they feel better, that's great. I would say that the science doesn't support that in that way.
Sure.
From a muscle recovery, from a body mass, body size, skeletal muscle size. But again, everyone is individual.
Right.
And I want to be very clear that I am not anti-plant.
Right.
I'm not. And I am not at one extreme or the other. I do believe in eating high quality protein. I know its importance. And I think what's happened now, and part of the reason I was so excited to come and talk to you, is that what we need in order to have a healthy world is we need transparent conversations.
So you're not extreme either way. You're saying, where's the science?
I am saying,
how do we lean into the science?
I'm saying, what is the truth?
Yes.
What is supported by the science? What do we know to be true? And then we can make decisions.
Right.
Whether an individual is plant-based or an individual is eating a high-protein diet, which I believe in because I've seen it for decades, and also it's in the literature, high-quality evidence in the literature. I believe that to be true.
Sure.
And what's happened now is
you're saying it's also hard to be a high-protein diet plant-based.
It is difficult, and it can be done, but it needs to have very careful, nutrient complex. Again, it's not just about a macronutrient. Food is a matrix. For example, in beef, there's creatine, there's components that you won't get from plants in beef. You cannot get it otherwise. There's no creatine in plant products.
Really?
No, it comes from meat, right? The bioavailability of iron is much higher in red meat. B vitamins, zinc, these are things that are what is offered.
Sure.
Taurine,
they're not in plants.
They're just not in plants. So we have to be able to have intelligent conversations. And right now, what we hear is a lot of narrative and a lot of don't eat meat because it's bad for the planet. Well, the reality is, in the US, if we care about global warming and we really look at what are the biggest drivers, we're looking at 80% is industry, electricity, and transportation. This makes up a huge chunk, 80-some% or more. Agriculture in the US, it makes up what? Maybe 9%?
Right.
Wait, maybe 9%. Of that 9%, how much do you think is related to cattle or animal? Maybe it's 3%?
Right.
So what are we talking about? So the statistics is just not, it is a lot of discussion, when the reality is if you look at this book, right? So there's a book here, and you take one sheet of paper, and that's the entire world, okay? And then you fold it down to a postcard, like let's say it's half that. So the entire world, the land mass is one postcard. You take that one postcard and you give me your business card, Louis. And you say, okay, here's my business card. Now we tear it 2/3 and 1/3. Okay, so we're talking about land mass. We're now down to one business card, and 2/3 of that business card is called marginal land, which means we can't grow anything on it. It can only be used for cattle.
Right.
1/3 of that land can be farmed. So I bring the point up to this saying, are we looking at the right things? If you care about the environment and you live in Minnesota, then you shouldn't eat avocados. And why? Because of transportation.
Right.
So those are ways that individuals can make a big impact rather than reducing high quality nutrients Because ultimately, you live in a beautiful area.
Yes.
You're on a coast, and I'm on the other coast. But it's the people in the middle that we affect the most. So if we tell people to go more plant-based, which they're already eating 70% plants. This is according to the NHANES data. Right now, people are eating 70% plant-based. Who is it going to affect?
Well, I guess if you're focusing on your vision, which is to help people live a healthier, longer life, you need more quality protein.
You do.
Based on the evidence.
Yes.
And so it's not about having less or more plants. It's about having more quality protein to build skeletal muscle.
Yes.
If you want to eat more plants, eat as much plants as you want.
Go right ahead.
But it's also make sure you get the quality protein is what I'm hearing you say. Because that is one of the main factors to healthy longevity.
And healthy aging.
And healthy aging.
And we need more protein as we age,
Yes.
not less. We actually require more protein.
To build the muscle, to stay healthy and strong.
To maintain it, to just keep it. So basically, if you don't stimulate that tissue, right,
lose it.
You're going to lose it.
And it's harder to gain it back when you're 50, 60, 70.
I mean,
80,
I wouldn't know, but yes, yes. If we take the narrative that we are looking at right now, eat less protein, eat less red meat, do all these things, while you are young, you have a much greater margin of error.
What about the inflammation or disease conversation around, I guess, whey with milk, milk products and dairy? I grew up drinking about, 8 glasses of milk a day growing up in Ohio. I think it's the reason I'm a foot taller than everyone in my family because of the hormones probably in the milk and the beef and everything I was eating. But I also had a runny nose every day.
So this is something separate.
And it was like inflammation from the milk and from these types of proteins potentially. Or maybe there's a number of causes, but I got rid of the milk and I got rid of the
So that's just one source of protein.
Sure.
Right? And milk we know is really, I personally don't drink milk, but dairy is really important. Dairy is very bioavailable for the bones. A lot of people don't tolerate it, but I'm not sure that we can equate that with inflammation.
Okay.
So you can equate that with mucus production, but perhaps not inflammation.
But does any red meats cause inflammation?
There is no quality evidence to support that.
Okay.
And I will
There's
tell
suggestion, but not evidence.
So you bring up a really good point.
Or clogging arteries or these types of conversations.
Absolutely not. When calories are corrected, absolutely not.
What do you mean calories corrected?
The biggest driver of inflammation and obesity is excess calories.
Too many calories.
It's not protein and it's not red meat.
It's probably sugary drinks and
sugar.
It
is excess. It is not inherently bad if you have healthy muscle. It's not inherently bad.
Because your muscle will be able to process it and just flush it out.
So let's go back to red meat being bad for you. There was a series of papers in the Annals of Internal Medicine by a head researcher named Bradley Johnston. And he looked at a tremendously large number of people. And he questioned, well, should we reduce the amount of red meat that we're eating? And right now, I think on average, people are eating 1.6 to 1.8 ounces a day. Do you think that's a lot?
It's not that much.
That's like this much.
Yeah, it's not much.
Okay, so to say that we need, is this data true? Do we really need and believe these negative influences that we're hearing? So he went through the literature and he did something and put it through something called the grade system. The grade system is the global gold standard for evaluating evidence. Doesn't get better than that. And do you know what he found? That there was no reason for us to be cutting back our red meat consumption.
Interesting.
And it created so many issues.
When was this?
This was 2019.
Okay, interesting.
Pretty recent. They went after him. People went after him. They tried to not get it published.
Wow.
People were so up in arms. Again, food science.
Sure.
We should just call it, we should replace this with something else.
Emotion. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were so up in arms, and we have yet to see one randomized controlled trial with humans to support red meat being bad. It doesn't exist. There's a lot of epidemiology data talking about, this is where all that information comes from. But epidemiology is not high quality data. And we have many randomized controlled trials talking about the importance of protein, whether it's from Don Lehman's lab or Stu Phillips or Doug Patton-Jones or Kevin Tipton. These guys are like people that have been looking at it, or Heather Leidy. There are some really good researchers out there that are putting together information for that's available.
Sure.
And again, it's not to say that plant is bad or animal is bad. The point is we must have transparent conversations.
Yes.
So if the evidence is in fact that this is bad, then we should that red meat is bad or that protein is bad, we should be able to prove that. World War II, when rationing was put into place, they number one determined what is the amount of protein that we need to keep these soldiers alive.
Just alive.
Alive and healthy, functional,
yeah.
right? So they had to figure out a way to feed over 1 million people. How are we going to do this? So they